to my voice.
Patch 3.4 came with some big shakeups to the landscape of Legends of Runeterra, and two of the more impactful changes everyone had their eyes on were underpowered crowd favorites Viktor and Aphelios. My name is Boulevard here for GiantSlayerTV, and today I'm going to be breaking down how these two found their place in the meta together. If I could do this like a normal deck review and just go down card for card and maybe explain some of the cool synergies within the deck, why some of the more odd-looking cards may be in there, then my job would be easy, but my job's not easy, and what is on your screen is going to be just as important as what is not on your screen. Much like Draven Scion, finding two identical Viktor Aphelios lists is impossible, but where Draven Scion lists would differ by 5 or 6 cards, we're finding that Viktor Aphelios decks are varying by as many as 15, sometimes even more. But you only have so many eyes, and I only have so many screens, and I do need to put something in front of you to give you a baseline. So the deck that I picked was the Cup is Mine's version from his recent second place finish at Fight Night. Now again, there isn't really a stock version of this list, so I'm going to not go over some of the tech choices in here, but instead pull up some other lists that are comparable, give you an idea of what other people are running so that you have a general idea on how to build your personalized version of Viktor Aphelios based on what you like and what you do not like. The only 5 cards that I've been able to find in every single iteration of Viktor Aphelios are Lunari Duskbringer, Spacey Sketcher, Aphelios, Viktor, and Star Shaping. And even that's not as concrete as you would expect, as players have been known to substitute a few copies of their champions for either Zoe or Vi, which makes sense that this deck falls into a similar toolbox category as Zoe Vi. That's right, if you made me classify this as control, combo, aggro, midrange, I'm telling you to take a hike, I'm calling it a toolbox deck. But now's a good time to segue into Zoe Vi. You know, that is a deck that is a known factor, the Rubin pile as we typically call it, and it hasn't been meta relevant for quite some time. Certainly not since the release of Bandle City, as this deck often sought to outvalue the opponent, and outvaluing Bandle City decks was quite the hassle with Telescope and Mare at full power. So Aphelios and Viktor getting their buffs when they did, paired with nerfs to Telescope and Conchologist this patch, I believe is what propelled this deck to the forefront, despite it being very similar to the shell of the old Rubin piles. On top of that, your namesake champions play a lot differently. They are self-sustaining engines with incredible synergy between the two of them. Viktor and Aphelios work great together. They are co-leading managers. They're giving pep talks. They're going to meetings. They're really inspiring your workforce. Zoe and Vi would make eye contact at the water cooler and say something like, "Mondays, am I right?" But again, this is not what every list is going to look like, so I'm going to show you what some other lists that players are on look like. First, we have Monte Cristo. I'm on Runeterra.ar if you want to take a look at these lists for yourselves. We have Lunari, Duskbringer, Spacey Sketcher, Aphelios, Viktor, Star Shaping, like I mentioned, those 5 core cards. And then we throw in Sunhawk and Sump Dredger, Spell Thief, Guiding Touch, just a lot of one-ofs because Monty is up on the Subpersibles to try to make sure that this card is always going to be active. Scroll down to Fake Hero a little bit. Boom, we cut the Subpersible entirely. We go up a lot more on 2/3-ofs in 2-of territory, and we put in cards like Bastion, and we go up on Sunblessed Vigor, and play more for the defensive options on our champions because Aphelios and Viktor are definitely the kind of champions that you can just pillar on and try to win a game. Poro Cannon, another thing that is very popular in a lot of lists. We see Boom Baboon come in, and we see Ballistic Bot go out. Sump Dredger, again, another very popular option for the 3-drop slot. It can get a little bit crowded because remember, Aphelios, while it doesn't line up into the unit section, is a 3-cost unit that you are going to be playing in the deck pretty much all the time, usually as a 3-of. And then if we scroll down a little bit more, we get a third list to look at. We see We Stand Together. That one's not too common, but Pharaoh's Financer is another great example of just one more 2-drop that you can put in this deck. Pharaoh's Financer has great options. Give It All is something that you can get off the rip here and go ahead and, you know, pump everything up to the attack of whatever your largest augment unit is. There's also great options in Piltover and Zon. Just go wide, what have you. You guys know how Pharaoh's Financer works. I don't have to explain it to you. But those are what some of the other lists that players are playing look like, give you a better idea of what the options are, because I will be talking about Boom Baboon and your 2-drop slots and all that stuff as we get on in the video. So now that we've taken a look at some of the other lists, the one common factor that you will find across all versions of Aphelios Viktor is that every single unit in your deck either draws a card or makes a new card, with the only exception that I have found to be a 1-of or maybe 2-of Vi that players have put in. That is the only card, the only unit rather, that players will put in that does not self-replace. That is why we call this a toolbox deck. Now, generally when we get into ratios, again, everybody is on those 6 1-drops, the Lunari Duskbringer and the Spacey Sketcher. For 2-drops, they're generally maxing out as 6 2-drops as well. So, you know, Ballistic Bot, Mountain Goat, Boom Baboon, those are the 3 most common options. As I mentioned, Pharaoh's Finance are definitely something you can throw in there. Usually that's going to be if you are going for a 3 of split or you just want to go down to 5 2-drops. Again, it is all personal preference. And even if you want to try out 3 2-drops at a time, you can do something like a 2-2-2 split of all 3 while you figure out which ones work best for you in a practical sense. Now, when we get down to the 3-drops, again, Aphelios is going to be in there a lot more often than not. I think Aphelios is the one champion that most people agree should be the 3 of, but you've got Sump Dredger and Solari Priestess, again, sort of fighting for the spot there. And again, you are allowed to play a split of those. You could play like 2 Solari Priestess and 1 Sump Dredger, and it's not the wildest thing in the world, because if you feel like you are running a lot of 1-ofs or a few 2-ofs, you can go ahead and just up the number of Submersible. That is your payoff card. Now, Pursuit of Perfection, I think, is a little bit too far there. You gotta rein it in a little bit. Submersible, fine. You could even play 3 if you're going super wild on the 1-ofs, but I think that Pursuit of Perfection is pushing the envelope just a little bit too far. This is, again, a very toolboxy deck. And then the 4-drop slot, generally reserved for Viktor, but as we see here with the Cup is Mines build, some players are opting for that Blinded Mystic. Now, we're not really seeing a lot of Aloof Travelers, but it is another 4-drop option that comes to mind when we talk about Piltover and Zon. A little bit more meta-dependent, maybe not the perfect option for the meta that we do find ourselves in, the Sundesk heavy, sort of low-to-the-ground meta that we find, but there is definitely going to be a time in the future where you can put in the Aloof Travelers if you're finding more control or what have you. Again, very personalizable to your localized meta if you're going for a tournament, and it's a small tournament or an invitational or even the Runeterra League Academy, Runeterra Academy rather, where like you have a general idea of what your opponent is going to be bringing, the play style that they like. Maybe you put in the Aloof Travelers as a specific counter pick, and then that's really where we're capping out, other than the Submersible and the Star Shaping. Sunburst, the most expensive card I've ever seen anybody put in one of these lists. Never really going to go above that. So for the most part, we're playing like a 3 and 2-drop focus deck here. And then when we get to the spells, it's funny because they tend to look very different than sort of the rest of the deck. As we see here, Thermogenic Beam is a very popular option, as Mystic Shot, Get Excited are your 2 main removal forms, outside of course, Aphelios' Crescendum, but you still need something that's going to work on champions, especially in the mirror, which is why we do see so many Get Exciteds. But generally, your spells are where your removal is going to come in, or your protection for your champions, and that's really about all you're getting out of them. That's why we see Pale Cascades and Sunblessed Vigors. Your champions have very high organic health totals. Viktor as a 4 health and Aphelios at a 3 health, meaning that something like a Get Excited is going to be disrupted by as something as simple as a 1 mana overkill like Pale Cascade. So if you had something like these 2 health champions that you had to really try to pillar on, then Get Excited would be a bit more of a problem. But because you already have this high health, and we don't really see a lot of removal spells reaching 4 HP in Legends of Runeterra, you can get quite a few cards out of your opponent just by cycling through on a Pale Cascade. And then even if they do work out and they kill your champion, it's like, oh, well, you know, I've drawn a card off Pale Cascade, and if that's the case, then I Nightfall, which means I get another Aphelios gun, whereas you have discarded a card to Get Excited, which is why you will see the Sunblessed Vigors and the Bastions and the Pale Cascades and all that, those kinds of things fitting into this deck, because Aphelios and Viktor are very much cards that you can keep alive to just win you the game. And then, of course, Mystic Shot, a great removal tool as well. We see Time Winder in this list from the Cup is Mine. Again, not a very standard choice, but one of the ones that is in here. And then Sunburst coming in from a lot of players in order to get over the protection spells that their opponents are playing. Viktor is relatively easy to level, and you know, you can knock the spell shield off with a Mystic Shot or whatever you want, maybe something that you get off of a Spacey Sketcher. And then Sunburst is going to be needed to make sure that Sunblessed Vigor is not saving a tough Viktor or whatever your opponent wants to pump into it. Voltron style decks are very popular, and sometimes the health totals get up there. Pantheon is still a relatively popular deck on ladder and in tournament, so Sunburst is just something that makes sense. Again, a lot of the spells that you're going to be seeing are a specific meta call, and these are the ones that players feel that they need for this specific meta. So you're still going to be susceptible to high removal decks, things like Vengeance and Anivia, Ruination, all these kinds of Shadow Isle control decks. But for the meta that we currently find ourselves in, Mono Shurima is mostly keeping those slower decks at bay, which is what is allowing Aphelios Viktor to thrive as it is currently. Decks like this are full of micro synergies, 2 or 3 cards that work really well together that are fun to explore, because some of those cards may not be in your main deck. There might be some Celestials that have synergy with some of the cards in your main deck that you find through Spacey Sketcher or Solari Priestess or anything like that. But I want to focus mostly on Aphelios and Viktor because, to be honest, I don't have an infinite amount of time with you. So as I mentioned earlier, these two work very well together. If you play your gun as your second card for the turn, Aphelios will immediately net you whatever you phased out, and therefore the Hex Core is a literal perfect way to ensure that you are getting your steady flow of moon weapons. In exchange for being so helpful, Aphelios can lend an Infernum to Viktor every now and then, as Overwhelm on augment units can be very high impact on high health Nexus kills, and just one-shot your opponent out of the blue. That's one of the reasons that Ballistic Bot is such an appealing option for players as well. Just augment plus Overwhelm is a match made in heaven. Of course, we also have their level 2 sides. One of my big issues with Viktor, for the most part, has always been how little you get out of his level 2 side as a Piltover and Zaun champion. While Piltover and Zaun is a region with a lot of created cards, they're generally 1 mana cards or randomly generated 6+ cost spells. Focusing on the first classification, yes, 0 mana cards are great, but they are the power level of 1 mana cards and are almost exclusively going to be Ignition or Daring Poro, and that's not really super threatening even at 0 mana unless you have resolved a Glorious Evolution to give those Daring Poros augment. On the other hand, the 6+ mana generated spells are generally something that you are going to be playing in a deck that cares about specifically 6+ mana spells like a Jace deck or a Lux deck, and therefore you actually do not want Viktor to reduce the cost to 5 mana. And again, 6 mana to 5 mana, not nothing, but not super impactful. Now, when we pair the deck with something like Targon, where you have these Celestials that can come out at really any cost range, you have Moon Weapons that are, as of last patch, cards that effectively cost 3 mana in terms of what people are willing to pay for what they do. You know, the Moon Weapons didn't get any weaker when they moved from 3 to 2 mana, and now you will consistently have them available at 1 mana due to either a Viktor level up or an Aphelios level up. You can even get them down to 0 mana if you have both leveled champions at the same time. And of course, Aphelios is going to be giving you a constant stream to accelerate the Viktor level up, as well as give you that Overwhelm and Lifesteal combo, or one or the other. That's where a lot of the survivability of this deck is going to come in as well. It's just getting these big augment units and then going, okay, what is my opponent's Nexus total? Can I Infernum them to death? No, then I guess I will sever them back to 20. So I quickly want to talk you through one of my favorite combos that the deck has available to it, and that involves a leveled Viktor and a 2 out of 4 Aphelios. Now, this will work in a couple of different scenarios, but that's sort of your ideal. So you have your Moon Weapon in hand, you play that Moon Weapon, you play the Hex Core, that is going to get you your second Moon Weapon. You play that one and Aphelios will level. When Aphelios levels in Legends of Runeterra, it is seen as a separate ability from the front side Aphelios, meaning that you now hit a reset on that 2 out of 2 counter, and you can once again play 2 more cards in order to get a Moon Weapon for the turn. Because you were able to level Aphelios and play these 3 cards in a turn for only 2 mana, because leveled Viktor kept those created cards at 1 mana, and you have the Hex Core as well to go ahead and be a 0 mana activator for that, you have now spent 2 mana and have a leveled Aphelios that can get you a 3rd gun this turn, which is very impactful because 3 guns is all that you need to cycle through the complete catalog of Aphelios guns, meaning that if you are in this situation and you have 2 out of 4 on the Aphelios, no matter which gun you have in hand to start the turn, you can get Infernum and Severum for your Viktor and get a big swing turn off of it. And of course, that's just one of many combos that is available for this deck. I implore you to give it a shot for yourself. Try out all these little micro synergies. Find your combo, your bread and butter. What diamond in the rough card did you find to put in the deck that nobody else thought of? If you want to, share it in the comments down below. And while you're down there, you might as well leave a like since you made it this far in the video. And go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Click the bell icon or ring that little notification bell to get updated whenever a video goes live and you get to see my beautiful face again. Talk to you about decks and Legends of Runeterra. Again, I have been Boulevard for GiantSlayerTV. Thank you so much for watching.